Before we begin today's recording, I'd like to apologize because this is one of those episodes where I'm out and about. I'm at the mechanics and I'm getting the car fixed. And I figured rather than be late, I just whip out the phone and make a recording where I am. So you're going to hear some noise in the background, cars driving back and forth, mechanics and customers having conversations all over the place, and maybe some chickens and cows and goats. Okay, no cows around here, so maybe just chickens. Anyway, so that's it for the noise that you're going to hear in the background. I'd like to say congratulations. You've been listening for the last week or so. We finally made it to the end of How to Close the Deal, the series. So today's episode is just going to be a recap, so that if this is your first time listening to the podcast, you're going to be able to get it in one succinct recording, and then if you want the details, you can skip back and then listen to specific episodes in more detail. And then also with the recap, that would allow us to move on to other topics that we have lined up. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to tell you what topic we're moving on to next, because I got here to the mechanics and of course I left my trusty sheet of paper where I write down all the questions that I'd like us to tackle. I left that at home. So at the next episode, you guys are going to be able to know the trajectory of the next series of conversations that we are going to have. So for now, the recap. How do you close the deal in whatever it is that you are doing, whether you're in real estate or whether you're in the wedding or the event space, you're a photographer, you're a wedding planner, or let's say you're trying to run a carpentry business. So how do you close the deal? First of all, you have to give yourself a hard think, and you have to try and figure out if you're in a simple or in a complex sales scenario. Whether you're in a simple or a complex sales scenario or context will be determined by a number of factors: the deal size or the amount, how complex what you're doing is, the number of parties involved, and whether you guys want to have, whether it's desirable to have future relationships. So once you've looked at all these factors and you've determined that you are in a simple sales scenario, so let's say, with the example that I gave, the people in the wedding space who handle the pyro, all those explosive stuff that go on during the receptions, the firecrackers and all that. So if you sit down with your business partner or with your wife or with your friends and you determine that you're in a simple sales scenario because what you do is you sell pyrotechnics, then the way you sell or the way you push to close the deal is to use a much more product selling approach. So you're going to be talking about features and benefits and price, and then try and drive the sale as hard as possible. Now for the rest of us who are going to look at it and come to the conclusion that we're in a much more complex sales scenario because you're a wedding planner and you're juggling a lot, or because you're a videographer and there's a lot of artistic and aesthetic sensibilities involved, then what you have to do is a much more consultative selling approach. You're going to be asking lots of questions to try and figure out what the problem is. Is there a need for photography, video, wedding planning? What's the ideal vision that they have for the wedding video, for the wedding photos? What's the ideal vision for how they want the wedding day to be planned? What's the ideal picture that they have, basically. So we're going to be asking lots of questions, and we have to be much more consultative in our approach. So it's not going to be about features and benefits. So if you're a wedding planner or you're a decor person, don't go there and then start hitting hard about we're using Egyptian cotton, or we're using chairs that are made of crystals and stuff like that. So before you get to whether the chairs are made of wood, metal, or crystals, or whether you're going to use Egyptian cotton, or whether you're going to have imported drapes flown in from Italy, before you get into all that, have a consultative session, sit down, ask questions, try and figure out what problem do they have, is there a need for your product or service, and what's the ideal vision. And then you're going to be able to answer the question, with my skill set and with what it is that I have in inventory, this is how we're going to be able to solve your problem. And then from then on, you move on to the question of price. So that's really important. Why you ask yourself, are you in a simple sales scenario or in a complex sales scenario? Because that will determine whether you're going to be all product selling going to use a product selling approach or whether you're going to use a much more consultative approach. Then after that, you also have to give yourself a hard think and try and figure out what does closing mean for you. If you're one of these people who believes that closing is the big ask and you're going to just, the first time you meet them, ask for the 1.5, then by all means, do that. Go to YouTube, talk to other friends and business associates and learn those one-time closing techniques. But if you believe in incremental ways of pushing the deal forward, securing one commitment, one day at a time, what we call one call closing in traditional sales circles, basically that just means that with each phone call, with each email, with each engagement, what we're trying to do is to move the deal forward a little bit. And so the idea is that if you make a series of positive advancements each time you meet, you should be able to get to that point where you get that big ask for the 400k or 1.5 or whatever it is that you are charging. So those are two ways to go about it. And then if you want to close the deal, you also have to figure out whether you have a deal in the first place. And determining that is going to be a matter of qualification. And so that means you have to figure out, who am I speaking to? Is there a need? Are we in agreement on budget or financing if you're in those kind of industries? Because for our people in the real estate space, they are lucky. If you sell real estate or if you sell cars, you're lucky that you're able to partner with banks and you can arrange financing. And that's one way of getting rid of money objections. So if you're in that space, questions around financing as well. So basically you have to figure out if you have a deal in the first place, because the common narrative that people have on whether they have a deal or not is they just assume that if the person has a lot of money, then what you do is you have a deal. So it's not just about how much money the person has. Is there a need? Is there a want? Are you guys aligned on all the other expectations that come along with the business deal? Then, having gone through all this in mind, we also, now that we're in agreement that the approach is a one-call close and that we have to move things forward incrementally, we need a CRM so that we can advance the deal. The CRM is just going to be that thing, whether it's a diary or a series of notes or some app on your phone or your computer that will help us drive the deal along, because it's going to keep a record of who you're talking to, what stage of the conversation are you at, what obligations, what are the obligations that you have to fulfill at this point? Let's see, what else? And what are the outstanding things that you guys have to walk through? So you absolutely need that, because if you're only speaking to one customer for a year, then you don't need a CRM. But the moment you start talking to 3, 4, 5 people, even if it's just 2 people a week, and that's 8 people a month, you need a CRM, because you can't run things from memory. You're going to forget who did I speak to, when did he say we're going to meet, how much did we agree to, have they paid a deposit, how much did they pay, what is outstanding, and what am I supposed to do next to drive the deal forward. If you don't have a CRM, you're not going to be able to answer those important questions. So that is the summary about how you close the deal in whatever it is that you do. So how do you close the deal? Number 1 is make sure you have a deal in the first place. And then number 2 is to schedule the advancements so that you can move things closer along to fruition with each call, with each email, or with each house visit. So that's the summary pretty much of what we discussed over the last I think it's been 9 or maybe 10 episodes. So if this is your first time listening to the podcast and you'd like to hear about any of these things in much more detail, whether it's qualification or whether it's a simple or complex sale, or let's see what else, what a CRM is or how useful it is, after you're done with this recording, just head back to the menu and then you look at the hashtags. I hashtagged, is that it? Hashtagged? Yeah, so I hashtagged them from 1 to 9 or maybe 10, I can't remember how many. And then you will see the subject right next to it and you'll be able to get into it in much more detail. So thank you very much for listening to the Sales for the Nigerian Wedding Industry podcast. I'm your host, Abuja-based sales consultant and event media professional, Tabishima Ayedin. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next recording. And please hit me up. Let me know if these on-the-fly podcast recordings are a problem. When I'm recording in unconventional environments. If they're a problem, let me know. But until then, I'll just keep on making these recordings whenever I'm available so that we can keep on exploring these wonderful, juicy, and useful ideas about how to use personal selling to move our businesses forward. So thanks for your time and attention. I'll catch you guys at the next recording.